The information presented is for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are not necessarily the opinions of any Daikin company. This information should not be confused for accounting, legal, medical, or other professional advice. Please seek advice from a qualified professional for any specific questions.
Welcome to the Accelerated HVAC Success Program. My name is Ben Middleton. I'm the National Sales Training Manager for the Goodman, Amana, and Daikin brands. Today I'm joined with Paul Vishnesky, the President of Higher Dimension, and Heidi Barnett, CEO of ApplicantPRO. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
So I just want to get to know, how did you guys get into this space of employee recruiting and retention, and what brought you into this space and where you are today?
Well, let me start out, Heidi. I've been in the business for about 30 years. My very first client in this business from a retention and hiring standpoint was Lennox Industries about 30 years ago. And our job was really to help the contractors hire and retain the best people they could. So my experience started there. I really liked the industry a lot at that time. It was a new job for me, a new opportunity. And what I found interesting was my clients at the time actually told me how to be a success for them in the industry. So where I'm at today is, over time, I partner with someone here that is really phenomenal in this industry and with what I do software-wise. So what we did is, over time, my clients told me how to be a success for them. So from a recruiting standpoint and from a retention standpoint, I looked at all kinds of products and opportunities to help them create the success they wanted from a hiring standpoint. I came to ApplicantPRO and Heidi years ago, and we've had a working laboratory now for maybe 4 or 5 years, I guess. It's been highly successful, but what we learned from it is that with all my experience in the industry, what happened was when I put this first product out, Applicantlist, for recruiting purposes, we really learned a lot because we had a working laboratory and every day was a new challenge. And what we found is we really needed to take this product into a whole different level of expertise. We got that expertise from our clients, the contractors that were struggling day to day and finding and attracting the best quality applicants they could. So I'm going to let Heidi talk about the actual company, where they've been, where they're at right now, and why we partner with them. Because I could have endeared myself to all kinds of different programs out there. It's kind of like there's a couple cars out in the garage, and you don't know what they are, but the superficial description is the same because everybody does recruiting, right? So they got 4 tires, there's an engine, there's a steering wheel, and you go out there. The difference is one's a Ferrari and one's a Hyundai, and the superficial descriptions are the same, but the performance is decidedly different. And so that's where Heidi and I really made a really good partnership in terms of what we're doing for the industry, in terms of recruiting and retaining the best quality applicants. So I'll let her tell you about ApplicantPRO and how they evolved.
Yeah, I think that was a great tee up. Talking about recruiting and retention, there's really 2 schools of thoughts around it, where you have a recruiter who basically goes out and finds someone and brings them in. And then the other side, you have software, right? And the software is kind of a do-it-yourself model, which is great for those that are ready to do it themselves.
Sure.
What happens is that we found, and like Paul talked about this, the clients are telling us what we need and what they need in order to be successful. And what we found was there was a gap between the two. And so what they really needed was software to help, but also the service component of someone helping them through it, because they're trying to run a business on the day-to-day. And sometimes that requires them being in a truck or, running out on a job or doing those things. And all the while they still need to find and then maintain their clients or their employees. So, ApplicantPRO, we've been in business for 15 years from the software side. But Paul mentioned for 5 years, we've been working together in this area. And we've also been growing ourselves. So we're up to 300 employees, but we started, I was their 7th hire 12 years ago, and ended up in this place where we've just continued to grow. So last year we grew double in size. And the same principles that we teach our clients, we also have done on our side in order to be able to help us to grow and to find the best quality candidates for the opening. So that's kind of our story and how we ended up here. And then we've crafted somewhere between a recruiter model and a software model to find the best model that works for the home services industry.
So you mentioned principles as that you follow and that you teach. What are those principles when it comes to recruiting and retaining employees?
Yeah. Are you okay if I answer?
Sure.
Okay. Sounds good.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So from the recruiting side, let's go there first. Is that okay?
Yeah.
We'll head into recruiting first. So from the recruiting side, a lot of times recruiting is just marketing, and that's how we view it. And that might just be my lens of the world because I am a marketer. But if you put out a really not so awesome product and then throw a bunch of eyes on it, it just fails faster, right? It doesn't really help you to be able to progress. And so it all starts for me with the job ad and being able to create a product that you can then put a bunch of different eyes on to be able to take a look at. So if you start with that, that's where, you've got this component of what your product is. You put distribution behind it, right? We're pushing this out to the job boards. A lot of people know about Indeed or their workforce services sites, those types of things. That's where you get the eyeballs on the actual product. And then you make it really easy for them to apply for the job. And then on that back end, the screening component is making sure that you actually got the right people in the door, because we do our best to cast a really wide net, right? And to pull in as much as you can. And then we do screening on the back end to make sure that it is, we're getting the right people in the door for them. And then it kind of circles back around with when you have a good culture and people are talking about you and your employee referrals and all of those things help to drive more people into the business. And that's where recruiting and business growth come hand in hand, because if you don't have people that will help you to be able to grow your business, then it doesn't really matter how many calls you get in or how good your marketing is or all those pieces. And so they come really hand in hand.
Well, let's tie back into that, because I think culture is really important when we talk about any company, right? And what they have. And one of the biggest challenges I hear in the home services industries today is retaining their good people, right? What ideas can we offer around employee retention?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And I hear that all the time. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges right now, in that since the talent pool is a little bit short, people have to really create a culture by design and keep who they currently have. And there's a lot of ways to do that. The job seeker needs, I think, have changed after COVID, post-COVID. I think the currency that they require is different than just a dollar bill these days, because they're asking themselves, and there's a big difference, by the way, between the philosophy of how I want my culture to be and then the reality. And that's a big problem, because if there's a disparity between here's who we say we are versus here's who we really are, and the experience is different than that, then that's where you have turnover. That's where you have performance issues. You have all kind of issues that happen there. But today, I think most importantly, that job seeker is, tell me how you're going to help me improve my day. How are you going to help me and my family? How are you going to give me more security? What about my existence? What about my paycheck? Those are things that are important to them. And then most importantly, how am I going to help myself? If I'm going to work for you, how are you going to help me help myself? So that is how you create a better culture. And there are ways to do that. It takes training. I always said, if you look at an organization, any organization, you can look at it on a bell curve. You have one deviation, which is the bottom half and the top half, and the middle, the general milieu of the organization, about 68.2%. The top half, they're easy to identify. They're the ones hitting home runs, and they're the movers and shakers and doing things great. You don't want to lose those guys, for sure. The bottom half, they're easy targets to identify. They come to work late, they show up late, they leave early, and that's where turnover happens a lot. The problem is turnover can be infectious. So the middle is what we're concerned about, because the middle is the biggest resource they have in their organization. And those are the ones that they don't contribute negatively, they don't contribute positively, they come to work, they do their job. But those are the people we need to move on the upside of the bell curve. So they are the ones that create opportunities. They're the ones they're excited about coming to work and getting things done. So the culture of companies now, I think, is probably most important. And so it goes back to what we talk about, Heidi and I, when we went out and we looked at what was being sent out to these job boards by contractors. There was nothing there that said, come to work for us. We have what you don't have right now. And that's the culture, that's the leadership, that's the opportunity in that company. So when we write a job, we always talk to that owner, the manager of the company, and tell us, what's it like to work here? And be honest. There cannot be a disparity when you post a job between who you are and who that job seeker actually finds out you are. Once they get in the job, turnover happens in 90 days. That's not what they thought. That's not what they heard. That's not what they read. So for us, we like to hold the client's feet to the fire and say, listen, be honest. I mean, are they working 6 days a week? Are they working overtime? Tell us what's happening, because that's important. You want to tell the truth to the market, and then the good people will come. If that's what they want, if there are things you have in your culture that outweigh maybe overtime or extra work, I'm in, sign me up. So we have to be, and every market's different. The other thing is every market's different, whether it's a small rural community or it's a large, if it's LA, Miami, Denver, Houston, LA. I mean, we work in all those markets. They're all different, and the competition is very tense. So defining the job based on the market and the expectancies of that job seeker is really critical in this market right now.
Are you okay if I add something?
Yeah,
Ben?
absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things that is interesting, ApplicantPRO is in Utah, and we're in a heavy tech sector. So there's a lot of tech companies around, and you think about it, it's the ones that you see on TV with the Nerf gun rooms and all of the fancy perks and all of those things. And we just simply didn't have it. And so what we had to do is figure out how we're different. And one of the things that we talk about in our job ads and with our employees and with our culture, like Paul talked about, all those things have to line up so that what they are applying for is actually what they're getting. But one of the things we focused on was flexibility. And we said, you can be with your kids, you can run to a school program, you can do whatever, as long as you're getting your work done. We're an intense place to work. We do a lot of great work, but we want you to have a work-life balance. We talk a lot about that. That was one thing that was unique for us that didn't cost any money, but it really just took us really focusing on it from a culture perspective. So if you're worried that maybe you don't pay as well as some of the other big players in the market, think about how you can stand out. What can you do differently? Is there always a really fun summer party? Is it a family-based culture? Is it that we teach you the trade from the very beginning? We'll educate you, so you're bringing in a bunch of new people, but you're creating a culture and piece that you want. So it's not always about the dollars necessarily. It is really about having a distinct focus on what that looks like and figuring out what makes you tick. And one of the things we recommend is talking to your employees and saying, why do you work here? Why do you like it here? What is it that makes us has made you stay for 5 years? What is it? Those things then you can spotlight and really drive a strong culture around that. So I wanted to point that out. There's another point that I wanted to bring up. There was a study that I read just recently about the fact that if you sit next to a high performer, you're more likely to perform high. And the statistics are crazy, something like 60% or something like that. And it will drive up their production by 60% or something. If they sit next to a low performer, it's a similar situation. And so when we're talking about culture, when you have someone who is the epitome of what you want for a culture or a really great worker, start having them do ride-alongs. Start having them spend time with those really good top performers, and you're going to see a pull in that direction from that group in the middle. And we started a best friend at work program, and kind of corny to say, but when we started a new hire, we would sit them next to someone who was a top performer. Because what you would find out is they wouldn't always feel comfortable asking their boss about certain things. And so what they would do is lean over and say, hey, Paul, what should I, where's the bathroom? Or, hey, what's our next holiday off? Or those types of things. And what you get alongside of that is this early loyalty, early dependence, early relationship building, and you kind of set it up with your top performers. So then you're getting that pull up a little bit. So culture, I think, can be tricky because we think we've got to do all these cool things, and it's not necessarily that. It's figuring out why you're different and why your people like to work for you, and then just driving that piece home.
I really like what both of you are saying. The theme that I kind of pick up as you're talking about this is authenticity.
Yeah.
And just being authentic to who you are, understanding who you are, and not trying to be something that you're not, or not trying to portray something that you're not when you're going out into the marketplace. I think another big challenge we have in our industry is our industry has just a huge echo chamber. We have all of these industry events that contractors are constantly getting together at. And you see it at all of these events. People get together and they say, boy, it's really hard finding new employees, or, I've got all of my employees are leaving, or whatever the challenge may be. And you get a couple of contractors together. They all agree, yep, they're having the same problem. And then they ask all of the people that are having the same problem, well, what are you doing about it?
Correct.
Well, here, I've got this ad that I've been using for the last 15 years. Oh, really? Send me a copy of that ad because I want to send that ad out. Or I made this employee handbook that we put together, and, send me a copy of that handbook. Maybe I can copy it and use it. But the problem is the person they're asking is the person that's having the same problem that they're having, and they're not changing the dynamic. And so I think the first step that you talk about, this authenticity, is a really big deal. So why do service-based employees turn over at a higher rate than other companies out there? Have you done any research or looked at that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different pieces. One of them is just the nature of the work. It's extremely taxing, right? Physically, and you just always have to be on your game. So but physically, they tend to wear out, right? And what we see is that if you guys run lean as our clients, like if I'm talking to our clients, when they run lean, what ends up happening is that they burn out the rest of their employees, right? And so one of the recommendations we make is to consistently be hiring. Have a job ad out there, always available for people to come and look, even if you're not actively hiring. It will allow for, if someone's saying, I'm overworked, or you see that calendars are starting to fill up, or those types of things, you can easily pull the trigger, right? And you can start making those decisions earlier. But that's one of the things that can be, it's really a taxing job if we don't plan for and create opportunities for other people to be in the business, then we're going to burn out our good ones. And that happens all the time. They'll leave for $1, maybe not even that. They just want a different spot because, I keep telling you I'm too busy. I keep going home way late at night. And at the end of the day, no one's listening to me.
Yeah, it's a contingency plan. I just got a call from a contractor the other day saying I need to hire someone now. Now, we're in the middle of summer. It's 104 degrees here in Houston. It's 105 in Dallas. These guys are working hard. And when a contractor goes into the season, they're thinking, okay, well, I've got everything set. I've got my contractors. And then what happens? They hit a wall. Guy doesn't show up for work. I've had enough. I'm done. For whatever reason. It hasn't been acknowledged. It hasn't been changed. The schedules is highly burdened. And so what happens is when that happens, you have the stress level that goes way up. And now, what do? Well, I've got to put an ad out real quick. I need to find someone right now. I'm leaving money on the table. And they haven't planned for the summer because it's inevitably it happens all the time. And like Heidi said, when that happens and you lose a tech and you've got incoming potential revenue, you're overburdening your current team. And when that happens, then you have performance issues, you have morale issues, you have all kinds of issues that come up and boil up in that culture, and now your perspective on how do I manage my team becomes totally different. I got to just keep them somehow. And so, we look at it from the standpoint of an insurance policy. I mean, we talk about recruiting all the time, but in this business, with the way the talent pool is, it's almost a must. Like you always have to be recruiting. It doesn't mean you need to hire, but it means you need to develop your active job-seeking database. make contact, do automated emails, which we can do over time, keep them involved, keep them in touch, and keep your current employees consequential, whatever they're doing every day. If they do something well, tell them the minute they do it. Don't wait. Hey, last week, by the way, that was a great job. The motivation starts to go really quick if you don't acknowledge that person immediately. So those are just things from a culture standpoint which help. And the market's not easy, but there are ways to overcome the stress and the anxiety of having to staff up all the time, and also capture the revenue that's out there right now in the heat of the middle of the market right now, which is booming. So
I think another thing that harms retention overall is that a lot of people don't see a pathway for growth, right? And so what is that pathway for your team? Do they want to manage? Do they want to, I don't know, do a different job or grow in their space or become higher up in there? So I just wonder if that's a big part of it, is if you can create a pathway for them or show them a pathway, even if they are unhappy, they'll be shooting for something else. And so keeping to your word when that happens, showing them the pathway forward, and creating opportunities. A lot of that comes with growth, though, right? And so hiring, we talked about replacement, but hiring can also help you to grow. Sometimes we make an initial investment of like, okay, let's hire a tech, even though our calendars aren't quite as full. It will alleviate the techs we have, but then it will allow for us to fill 2 calendars. And then all of a sudden your business starts to grow, right? Which as you continue to do that, then you have opportunities for leadership, you have opportunities for training. There's a bunch of different pieces that, again, will show a pathway forward, especially where this job is so physically taxing. They don't always want to be on the truck and doing those things. Providing other opportunities down the road will keep employees longer.
That reminds me of when I first got into this industry. I was blessed to just have a really forward-thinking leader, and he said something that struck me when I first came on board. He said, Ben, I just want to let you know you'll probably only be with us for about 5 years. And I thought, well, that's kind of an odd thing to say to a brand new employee coming on board. And I said, where are you going with this? And he said, well, we are going to train you so well that you are probably going to end up working for one of our product reps or one of our distributors or one of our manufacturers. In fact, we've got many employees that have moved beyond our company, and our goal is to develop your capabilities so that you can go anywhere that you want.
Incredible.
And the funny thing was, he had said that to every employee that came on board, and he had employees that were with him for 20 plus years. And then he also could point to, well, that person over there at this particular company, they worked for me. This person worked for me. This person worked for me. And instead of trying to hold on to people and say, I'm afraid of losing them, his attitude was, we want to just develop the capabilities of people so they can continue going on. And that created that loyalty. But to your point, this is a hard job. And so if people can see that they have opportunities to go other places within the industry, that's exciting to them. And I think that's important for people to have that mindset.
I love that story. I think that is incredible leadership for him to be able to say, I would see that almost as a badge of honor if you leave and go somewhere else. It's harder than it looks. And I think that he probably did a lot of work to be able to get there, because I do that as well, where I want my employees to be so successful that they want to leave, but I want to keep them. But sometimes we'll try so hard to hold on, and we hold on too tight. And so, coming out of the gate with that, I want you to be so successful and be trained in a way that will allow you other opportunities, is another piece of the culture, right? And that culture piece feeds into the overall retention of those employees. So love that story.
Well, and that happened before there was a whole lot of software in terms of the hiring. So the other thing that they did is they were constantly recruiting. And so they had bonuses for employees that brought in new employees. They also did large group interviews every single month, where they would bring in 50 people into a large group interview. And so they were just constantly, to your point, building their pool. And they weren't hiring every time they did those group interviews, but they were collecting a lot of resumes and having a lot of people on standby. So when they needed to, when it was 105 degrees outside, they had the list of people to start calling and saying, hey, we've got a position for you. And so that's the other challenge I see. When you get into that reactive mode, and now I have to throw bodies at it, you don't bring the right people in.
You make desperate decisions in that case, which it will feed this, oh no, now I need to hire again. And there's like a lot of anxiety that goes along with that. I was in that spot not too long ago where I hired someone who I knew was probably not a great fit, but I needed somebody for that role. And then you just have to make harder decisions down the road. So putting yourself in a place to always have that pool is really important, but it does take that forward thinking. And it also means you need to be staffed or have people enough that are ready to fulfill those roles. So constantly forward thinking, I think, is a leadership shift that a lot of the clients need to work on, of like, how do I want to see? Do I want to grow? Do I want this to grow and progress? Do I want to really focus on keeping people? If I do, what strategies am I going to take?
And what does bringing that wrong person in do to the overall morale of all the rest of your employees?
Yep. Morale. And then also with customers, where a lot of these guys are face-to-face with customers, it can harm your business overall. It can harm your employee base. If you hang on to them for too long in desperation, it's like a cancer in the organization.
So since you're the hiring experts, let's talk a little bit about hiring the right people in the first place then. And I think this is a great segue into that. How do you make sure you get the right person?
Yeah. Well, we have a formula for success.
Okay.
I'm going to let Heidi talk about it. She's really good.
I think we talked about it a little bit earlier on, right? And I think that a lot of it comes with getting that right messaging out with your job description. It's more of an advertisement than your description, of really sitting down and making sure that you are honest about who you are as a company, leaning into some of those quirks that you have, talking about some of the ways that you're different. And it's not just, we pay better and you get the 4th of July off, but really leaning into who we are, right? Because to your point earlier, you were talking about how everyone's sharing best practice. What happens if you all share best practice is it just becomes vanilla, right? And you don't have that opportunity to stand out. I'm not saying don't share it, but I'm saying then it's going to make you go to the next level of talking about how you're different, why you're different, and all of those pieces. So the best retention piece is getting the right people in the door at the right time. That lack of desperation will make it so that you make those better decisions when it's time to hire, always having a pool of candidates ready to go, and then refining over time as your company grows, as you want to level up. What are the things that change in the job ad? And then adding the distribution to that to make sure that you're getting it into the right places so that the right people are seeing it. You talked about employee referrals. Sometimes that's viewed as not so great. Sometimes it's viewed as awesome. We love employee referrals, but we do them a little bit different, where we push our employees to become marketers, where they're not just like, hey, Ben, come work for me. It's more about, hey, my company's hiring. They throw it on social media. They share it with their friends. They share it with their friends. And then you have this additional pool that comes in that can help to get that message out. So there's a lot of different pieces that can help with getting the right person in. But I think that it has to do a lot with that cultural piece, building the cultural piece and making sure that you're not making desperate decisions, that we've got that candidate pool going all the time and that we're messaging out the right message in the first place. Because I think if we're not getting that message out in the right way, then they just won't come. It's like if you build it, they will come type of messaging. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Paul and Heidi. I really appreciate you guys coming in here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do you have any final parting tips or words of advice for our guests here?
The only thing I would say is you need to focus on the job seeker these days. It's apparent that the whole mindset's changed. So start with writing a job that is impactful, that is endearing, that gets people involved when they read it. So that would be one of my things I would say would be most important. Would think about how that job is going out the door when you're writing it.
Yeah, and lean into your differences. That cultural piece, let them know, talk about it, and be okay to embrace it. Do it on purpose, and it will make a huge difference in your hiring and retention.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.